Or it's a ring. It's a ring because the finger is essentially the most accurate place to like track your biometric signals. We had 157 rangers going through Rap Week, pairing their rings onto one single tablet. We got, I think, 700 successful syncs over the kind of 5 day period from 100% of
Hell
devices.
yeah.
Um,
That's awesome. That's transformative.
This is All Quiet on the Second Front, podcast where boring conversations around defense tech and national security come to die. Join me, Tyler Sweat, and my Second Front homies as we dismantle the mundane and cut through the bureaucratic bullshit to demystify the world of defense tech. But be warned, this is not a typical government podcast. Are you ready to get weird?
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Tyler Sweat. Welcome to another episode of All Quiet on the Second Front, the podcast where boring defense talk comes to die. Super excited. We were riffing a little bit before we started recording, so I don't want to tease too much of it. But got Geoff from the ŌURA team here. Excited to chat about, I think, a mix of looking at performance and technology and providing more insights, rich insights into performers and operators in a world where maybe we've got a little bit of like information and cognitive overload, and separating signals from noise and what really matters is increasingly difficult. So, Geoff, brother, I'm super excited to have you here, man. Thanks for swinging by.
yeah, thanks for having me, Tyler. Maybe today's where boring defense talk goes to sleep instead of where it goes to die. And let's see where this goes, man.
Hell yeah, brother. So, love to open these with a little bit, like let the audience really understand sort of who are you, a little bit about your background and kind of what's your story, what are you working on now?
Yeah, appreciate that. So I came into the world of wearables and health tech sort of organically, you could say. So I was working, as a management consultant for years, and um, moved from management consulting to work at an NGO. And well, I was at the NGO, I was working on like how connected technology was changing the way the economy worked and the way that society worked, and everything from like privacy considerations to like industrial policies. It's fascinating stuff. And in December 2019, I got connected with this researcher at Scripps who was looking at how wearable devices could predict where influenza outbreaks were going to happen. And it was like a little cool side project. I was maybe working on it 3% of my time. December 2019. And like a month later, people start hearing about this virus coming out of China. 3 months later, this went from being 5% of my time to being 100% of my time. And what the project was looking at is, there's all these biometrics signals you can pull off of wearable devices. How do you use that to help individuals manage their own health? How do you use that for public health? But how do you do that in a way that doesn't completely mess up and jam up individual privacy? And so I was working with every wearable company you can possibly think of was part of this working group. Uh, we had, academic researchers. I was working with the CDC, with the World Health Organization. Fascinating year. I feel like I got a sort of crash course PhD in epidemiology. Like everyone kind of got a crash course PhD in
Yeah.
epidemiology in 2020, And ŌURA was obviously part of this working group, and ŌURA was actually the first wearable company to do a study on how essentially how their device could predict the onset of COVID. And so I got to know the CEO at the time really well. He recruited me in, and that's how I landed in this kind of funny world of health devices, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't think I'd ever imagine that the connection there would be from more of a global health. I think it's funny. It's what we were talking about before. Like I sort of equate, and maybe it's my own bias, I equate, the wearable to like a performance monitor, a recovery, I travel a lot. So I'm looking at like, hey, how am I sleeping? How am I thinking about sort of like behavior? And then how does that correlate to a lift or a day of work or something like that? Being able to bring those two together is even more powerful than maybe I thought. Where do you guys see? I guess when you look at your community and your user community, especially as you think in the broader sort of like national security, are you seeing performance based? Hey, how do I optimize, longevity of an operator or tensile strength of an analyst or an officer? Or are you seeing sort of health on that preventative side? Hey, what's broader sort of like resiliency?
No, great question. Great question. And it's worth taking a pause, like a beat on like what the Aura user experience is like, and then how that translates to that. So like,
Yeah.
you know, or it's a ring because the finger is, I can get into the science, people want to geek out, but essentially the most accurate place to like track your biometric signals. And that's because you got a really strong pulse signal coming off of your digital palmar artery, and our sensors are right there. So we get this great accuracy with that like little battery output. That translates into this app experience, a super sticky app experience. Like I've worked with a lot of wearables, a lot of consumer tech. Our user engagement is the envy of the industry.
Oh,
And
the
it,
app is awesome.
no, but appreciate that. And it's because we distill it down into these like really basic scores anyone can understand, right? Your readiness score, how ready are you to take on the day? Your sleep, how well did you sleep last night? What can you do to improve it? Your activity score, how much are you pushing yourself? Over time, we've added things like a stress, both an acute stress and a chronic stress measure. We call it chronic stress resilience. Like, how are you, obviously a lot of language here that's similar to DoD, readiness, resilience, things like
Yep.
that. So that was that's sort of the app user experience itself. And what we have found translating that into the DoD, the early adopters were like the human performance, strength and conditioning coaches, the cognitive performance specialists that you see embedded with operators, that kind of thing. However, when we saw scaled adoption, the first big scaled adoption we had in DoD was illness detection. It was the RATE program we were doing with the Air Force, over 12,000 auras distributed to airmen, also a few other departments, but mostly Air Force. And that is exactly what you're saying. It's this predictive kind of preventative health and measure. And that's because of the sensitivity of the ŌURA Ring. We could see changes in your respiratory rate, your body temperature. We've got 7 body temperature sensors, so we can see these kind of micro fevers spike as your body's beginning to fight the infection, but before you show symptoms. And so the RATE study was able to catch COVID almost 3 days before the onset of symptoms. So,
Wow.
and then you could isolate the airmen and prevent the spread. However, as kind of COVID is obviously like faded into the background, what was so interesting about that study is that broke the ice. And so now we're seeing all sorts of use cases pop up. And a lot of those are like chronic stress related. So similar thing, how do you predict when someone's going to have a behavioral health event prior to that? It sounds a little minority reportish, but it's not, because it's like I like to think of it as a check engine light. It's like we know something's going on, but we don't know what. And then can we get that person the resources that they need to sort of, get left to bang? Fatigue risk is another one. So
Yeah. Oh,
when
yeah.
chronic fatigue starting to build and people are operating weapon system platforms, or maybe it's a dismounted environment, and if we can see that someone is redlining and get them some support, or even what we're doing with the Navy is now starting to adapt Navy watch bill scheduling to optimize for fatigue risk and mitigate fatigue
Oh,
risk
cool.
really proactively. So hopefully, I don't know if that gets to your question, but
No, it does. It does. I like that. It's interesting. And the question, I mean, there's a million questions I could ask because it's super fucking interesting. Is like the one that immediately comes to mind, and I'm remembering, I won't like name the brand, but like there was this cool running thing a lot of us used, and we had these competitions of like, ooh, I ran further and I ran in a cool design, and then all of a sudden places that didn't exist existed, and it was a kerfluffle. How do you guys think about, bringing that, what is a really tremendous and like rich and easily consumable user experience,
yeah.
bringing those insights in and not breaking sort of that boundary in terms of privacy and security and all of that?
Yeah, great question. And we hear that example of like,
That's the
mapping
one that
out,
hurt everybody, man.
mapping out a base and like a forward deployed base in Afghanistan. Like, oh man. So the first thing just on that particular use case to point out, Aura doesn't have a GPS tracker in it. So I'm just going to say that up front.
Yep.
You can still map your run if you want to enable GPS on your phone when you're going for a run with your Aura Ring, and we can track your biometrics during your run. But by default, that is not enabled. Obviously, for our service members, our DoD customers, that is not enabled. So we're really sensitive to it. So just like hit that one right on the head.
Yeah.
But you ask a great question of like, how do you translate consumer technology and privacy standards into DoD technology, security, and privacy standards? And the good news is that we're building on a strong foundation. Like Aura has one of our cultural, we've got like a few sort of cultural values, like every company's got their values. One of ours, we call it we earn trust. And at the
Love
foundation
that.
of we earn trust is like we have to we're processing some of our members' most sensitive health data. And we need to be mindful of that. And so we're already building on a very strong foundation of information, privacy and security and all of that. And then the job for me and my team is to then translate that into like, well, how does that work for the DoD? So it starts from the hardware up. The hardware itself, like I mentioned, doesn't have a GPS device. There's no Wi-Fi on it. There's no microphone or camera. Sort of inherently a pretty secure device. The only antenna is
Yep.
a Bluetooth antenna that you can turn into airplane mode by putting it on the charger. And so based off of that, during the rate project, for example, we were granted a SCIF exception letter, so you can bring your ring into a SCIF. So that's like the hardware itself. And then on the data flow side, some of the kind of unique things that we've built on top of the already secure infrastructure that we have for a consumer device, we have what we call our de-identified flow. So we've stripped out all identifiable information for our DoD customers out of the sort of consumer app experience. So just to get that out of there,
Got
and
it.
then in a more secure backend enclave, if we need to do some re-identification or we want to do some analysis or we want to group data together. Hey, how is this unit performing? We don't group any of that data together, even if it's de-identified, unless it's in that secure environment.
Yeah. I mean, there's a very robust and awesome answer to that because I think that is something that concerns everybody, right? You think
Yeah.
about the joke is always, when I leave work, coming out of an agency or a building, I've got more computational power in my car than I can bring in. And part of it is balancing it. Like some of this needs to be a little bit more of a walled garden than others. So seeing that down at the sort of bare metal level all the way up, I think is the right way to go earn that trust.
And it's been, it hasn't been straightforward. Like whoever you talk, you'll talk to 5 different customers, you talk to a dozen different customers, and you'll get 36 different answers,
Oh
of
yeah.
what the right data flow structure needs to look like. And so what our mantra on the what we call the human performance team, which is the team that largely services the DoD, our mantra is to build the most adaptable technology stack to meet any mission requirement. That's how
That's
we think
cool.
about this.
Yeah.
And so one additional thing I didn't mention is we do have like an edge data collection and processing solution as well. So like completely denied or
Oh,
off
dope.
or
Yeah.
deployed environments. And what's cool about that is like the Aura consumer experience. It's like your ring, you pair it to your phone. This, I think we had, pull up the data, I think we had 157 Rangers going through Wrap Week, pairing their rings onto one single tablet. We got, I think, 700 successful syncs over the kind of 5-day period from 100% of
Hell
devices.
yeah.
Um,
That's awesome. That's transformative if you start
yeah.
to think about, yeah, okay.
So that's
All
the
right, so
kind of
that
structure
leads to this
we're
that
building.
leads to this question then
Right.
of,
Yeah.
hey, the story to get here is awesome. I think the solution you guys have is clearly awesome, right? Like I feel like it's a hair club for men, right? Like I'm also a customer. Like I like the first thing I look at every morning is the Aura app, and I'm like, how fast did I fall asleep? Like, how good did I sleep? Like, how much weight am I going to be able to pull this morning? What are you excited about? Like, when you look to the future and we think about sort of the ever increasing almost omnipotence of sort of like data and different sensors and different sort of fusion and insight and lower sort of power requirements or weight requirements for some processing that when you were in 2019, I was at an AI company and we were trying to sling a bunch of stuff that it took a really long time and it cost a lot of money to go actually generate the insight. What's the future look like for you guys? What's got you fired up?
I mean, sounds cliche, but AI, man, like we pull so much data, and every different person touching that data, whether that's the end user, whether that's the support staff, whether if you're in the soft community, maybe it's your POTIF staff. If you're in the army, it could be your H2F providers, um, or if you're just, a civilian, it could be your doctor,
Yeah.
and then think about the command layer, and we need to have different interpretation of the data at each one of those layers to make it useful to those people. And we're trying to build what we call our advisor, and can be able to configure that advisor for all the different audiences. And
Oh,
we
cool.
even at our kind of member level, like we've got women who are using Aura to try to get pregnant, and then you've got you know operators who are using this to make them more lethal. Like you couldn't have like more just kind of diversity in our end user base, and we need to configure the Aura experience to meet them where those individuals are at. And so we're running I don't think I can say who we're doing this with at the moment, but let's just say with a schoolhouse, where we are experimenting with configuring the AI advisor using essentially their training doctrine and uploading that into our advisor. So our advisor knows about their training doctrine and then says, is tailoring the messaging and insights, and hey, I know you didn't sleep last night, but that was because of that like 2 a.m. PT that you had to do, and here's what you can do to combat fatigue today, and
That's
getting
neat.
to that level of insights really, really, really cool.
That I mean, that you start really, I think that's probably the closest manifestation of like the early hyper empowered operator sort of how do we bring sort of like that digital battle buddy, that that actual coach, mentor, agent down to the individual soldier, sailor, airman, marine, operator, officer, whatever level, to be able to enable them to all continue to get incrementally better on their own, absent some large kind of organizational investment that needs to get made. I mean, it's a pretty material lever for national security.
Yeah, I think so. And our key need is like partners. Like we can't do this in a box, like
Yeah,
ourselves. Like that's the kind of work you got to do like on the ground with your
yeah,
customers. And that's sort of part of our philosophy is learning from a lot of the other defense tech companies out there. We
yeah,
think of ourselves as a bit of a startup within the startup,
yeah, oh, yeah,
the team. And we're just learning from the best of the breed in dev tech. In where that's all going is like innovate on the ground with your customers, rapid prototyping, rapid feedback, just be there. And
yeah.
that's the mantra we're trying to bring to our team as well, which is like a different motion from a consumer company that
Oh, oh,
typically
yeah,
like designs things in head office and then drop ships you a product,
yeah,
like
yeah.
so
No, that is a different, we'll call it a cultural artifact
yeah.
on, hey, we're going to forward deploy this whole team to just embed with the users and build that empathy and that insight, and that, I mean, you guys have the domain expertise and sort of the technical gravitas, but coming down and in, and that's what the user wants too.
And also like I'll acknowledge my gaps. Like I didn't serve. I don't know this space organically. I have augmented that with my team, like
Yeah.
So I had a tech, really famous tech CEO once sort of told me, like, you have three jobs as a leader in tech. He said, one, don't go bankrupt.
Yep.
Okay. Two, set the vision. And three, hire the team. You do those three things, you're set.
Yep.
Um,
That's right.
and you know, uh, that's the mantra I try to bring to this. So we've got the domain experts on the team, whether that's people who have served for 30 years and retired, whether that's we've got a PhD in athletic training who trains the naval special warfare guys on staff.
Awesome.
We've got PhDs in neuroscience who focus on brain health, and kind of you can imagine where that's
Oh
useful
yeah.
in
Oh
this
yeah.
space. And so it's been really cool to bring this sort of diverse domain team together to really get on the ground and drive this strategy forward.
Yeah. It's an awesome spot to be. And I think the time is right too. And I think you guys are growing and delivering a ton of value at a pretty material inflection point. I think for what does a national security community, fighting force kind of look like as we think about sort of future conflict. So one, like, glad you guys are doing the startup sort of inside the entity and you're building that team, right? Glad to have you in the fight. I'm gonna ask the last question, which can go in 100 different directions here, and sort of see, Geoff is king for a day, right? I always say you get a magic wand. I'll say you get a magic ring, and you can change one thing. You don't have to caveat like all any dependencies. It's met, right? What's one thing you change and why?
I think what I want to change is this pervasive culture that your health comes last.
Yeah,
And I'm guilty of this all the time. And I'm working this space and I'm very conscious of this, but you know, we make a ton of sacrifices in whatever line of work you do, especially if you're in the military, that puts your health at the bottom
yep.
and but that's a short-term trade-off, man.
Oh
Like
yeah,
you might meet tomorrow's deadline or, you know, kind of get this one thing done, but it means that you're not going to show up as well tomorrow. And
yeah.
if we could change that, this is a bit of it's a cultural change that I'm talking about.
Big
And
cultural change.
uh,
Yeah,
and I think that's what I would want. And I think we'd all live longer. I think we'd be happier. I think we'd be more effective. I think we'd be more secure if people had the space and we had the kind of culture to make that happen. I'm seeing bright spots. Interestingly, I'm seeing bright spots of that change happening. And you wouldn't think it, but in many ways, the DoD is incubating some of that culture change. But
yeah.
it's
I'm
still
glad to
early
hear
days.
that. I'm not. I mean, I was in the military a long time ago, but like to your point, like you didn't go to sick hall, right? Like if you were an officer, like you didn't get sick. Like if you were a leader, you didn't miss mission, you didn't miss movement, it didn't really matter. Like you missed if something serious was up, like you're missing a leg or something. But other than that, you got back up and went to work. And now
And
all of us are, in our 40s and we've had back and elbow and knee and multiple shoulder surgeries. And all of our doctors are like, your body shouldn't look like this at 40. And you're like, "Ah." So
well,
yeah, point taken. It's a great point.
but even more short term than that, you're seeing data come out of the holistic health and fitness program, for example, showing that culture is it also drives short term, loss of duty days because
Yeah,
people are pushing themselves, getting injured and not
fair.
bouncing
You
back
break,
and
you break, you
recovering in
break, you
time.
break. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that
And
compounds in the near term. Yeah, hell
so
yeah.
yeah, like obviously impacts Tyler, in his 40s, but it's also degrading our readiness today. Uh,
Yeah, that's a great point. Dude, this is awesome. I'm such a fan of what you and the team are doing. I think it is such an awesomely needed. I wish I had it when I was a lieutenant running around Afghanistan. It is a game changer. So thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for being here, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Cheers.